medium along that corridor. In some cases, the maximum height permissions are 40 meters. In some cases, they're 20 meters. And then in behind is the low-density residential.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Vassic?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Thanks for that presentation. I'm just curious, at what point in the process does the conversation about community benefits start happening, and what they will be, and when they will happen?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Vassic. It's an ongoing conversation, usually through the whole process, but it is a two-step conversation. And the first is to determine whether or not this is an appropriate location to warrant an increase in height, and if so, to what degree. So that's usually the first step. And then if the answer is yes, that it is warranted, or that there's justification to support the increase in height, then there needs to be a conversation of what community benefit or what package of community benefits is appropriate to provide in exchange for the height. Now, our staff are also going through guidelines right now to modify that process, which council has seen. So there's also appraisal that will be done to determine the value that additional height might generate.
I'm not convinced this council has seen that. Have we? Who has a better memory? I'm not convinced that we've seen it, but maybe that's a report that can go to new members of council. Further questions? Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. And certainly there's a lot to ask on this, and I'll save most of it for the applicant, as I think some others will. There's been some press attention about some existing low-rise apartments, and because they're older, tend to have more affordable rents along Dietz Avenue. I was wondering if staff had either from the applicant or through other means had an idea of whether those existing apartments meet the definition in our official plan of affordable. I know everybody has different definitions of affordable housing. Ours is, I think, generally 10% below AMR and yada, yada, yada. I'm wondering if we know whether that's the case. And if so, if that triggers any policies that we currently have in place at the city in terms of how we consider these developments.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry. I am not aware as to whether or not these buildings constitute within the definition of affordable. However, I know that staff are continuing to encourage and recommend that affordable units be incorporated within developments, and this is no different from one that we might request or encourage that being considered in the design of this development.
Yeah, certainly the potential Section 37 community benefits piece feels like a vehicle we don't often have, should they be proven relevant to consider looking at some of those things. I know Councillor Vassic was just when the conversation starts, and staff have a test, but in terms of starting to think through what interest there would be should the test be met, I think there's a resoundingly obvious answer from many members of council at this point, subject to comment, that we'd hear through this process, that affordability is of interest wherever we can find it and preserve it.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff? One more. Councillor Bodley, go ahead.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. Echoing Councillor Henry's comments there, but question, with the parking spaces, the numbers, sorry, excuse me, you had the current zoning requirement would be 2,362 spaces, and the proposal is for 1,526. How does that that's under the old zoning bylaw, if I'm reading that correctly. What would the requirement be under the new zoning bylaw? Do we know?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley, my understanding is that is a requirement of the new zoning bylaw. I can double check, but ultimately, I'm not sure of what the numbers would be with the old versus the new and how that would compare. I do know in many cases in our new zoning bylaw, we have reduced some of the parking rates. So I suspect that the new zoning would be lower than the old, but as far as the specifics, that's not something I have for you right now, but it's something I could get back to you if that's of interest.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you, Council, for only asking questions of clarification. I forgot to mention that. I will now ask Grain Registered delegations to come forward, of which we have 4 on my list. And the first up is Andrew Kent and Carrie Curtis of Killam Apartment REIT. Oh, for
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, members of the public, staff. First, I want to commend you all on the community you've built, on the municipality success as of late, specifically, and